Hey guys, I hope you are having an absolutely awesome day and a fantastic Thursday. Welcome back to Popcorn Cinema, where today I'll be going over my personal thoughts and opinions of the first 3 episodes of Marvel's What If series. Before we begin though, I'd like to just take this brief moment to remind you guys to like and subscribe to this video if you're enjoying what you're seeing. And that way we can hopefully do some more Marvel What If content. Now that that's out of the way, let's jump straight into this video.
What are you doing? This is our only chance.
What If Captain Carter were the first Avenger honestly didn't sit too well with me. I mean, come on guys, does this really work? Think about it. We were offered What If. We were promised alternate timelines and vastly different stories, but episode 1 was really just a gender swap. All we know after the end of this episode is that in this timeline, Peggy Carter is Captain England, or whatever you want to call her. Steve Rogers gets some sort of Iron Man Mark 1 or Ironmonger, if you will, type of suit, and Bucky Barnes does not become the Winter Soldier. If we're being honest with ourselves, history won't really change that much from these events. I mean, it's not like Disney decided to actually go ahead and show us what happened much beyond the events of, the war, but I mean, the only thing we can confirm from this episode is that in this timeline, Tony Stark probably never builds the Iron Man suit because Howard Stark is never murdered by the Winter Soldier. But it never really shows us any of this. It doesn't show it playing out. For all we know, he could have decided to build the suit anyway, so the first episode's kind of meaningless if you think about it like that. Now guys, this episode is honestly just lazy. It's simply a rehash of the first Avenger, except the first Avenger is Peggy Carter instead of Steve Rogers. At the end of the episode, the Watcher goes on his monologue about how he is observing in all whatever he does. Well, good job, my dude. You're focusing on the most boring timeline. This episode really just feels like the writers said, what if every other line in Captain America was, you can't do that because you're a girl? Well, obviously she can do it. She had taken the super soldier serum. If anything, it should have been like this in the first place. Steve's heart was in the right place, but the battlefield just really wasn't for him. I have no idea why they didn't use Peggy Carter. Well, I mean, I do know why, because the Marvel comics and the time they were made, but you get the point. I mean, Peggy Carter, in reality, was the obvious choice, not Steve Rogers. I mean, this really feels like a step back, honestly, because, Peggy Carter is one of the founders of S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, she's a big deal. She's a super spy. And then they just kind of turned her into this weird, corrupted, they kind of just took the concept of Captain America, his whole bulky body and everything, and just kind of put Peggy Carter's head on top and then animated around that. Because that's what it looks like. Her body doesn't even fit it. It's just her head on this extremely muscular person. I mean, obviously you can tell she's a female, but it just felt weird. It just didn't land. And the story was way too similar to the actual movie, Captain America: The First Avenger. Okay, this is how I'd make episode 1 worth watching. What if Steve Rogers was the Winter Soldier? You see, this is actually a fun concept to play with because in turn, that means Bucky Barnes becomes Captain America. I guess, because I guess technically at that point he was already in the war, but let's just say what if. That's why it's called What If, okay? This is an actual what if, not just a rehash of the movie we've already seen. I mean, we all know Disney loves rehashing movies. I'm looking at the Star Wars sequel trilogy, because that's totally not just a rehash of the originals, am I right? Anyways, with Steve Rogers becoming the Winter Soldier and effectively, by extension, also becoming evil, I think that would make an interesting story, because he'd have to kill for Hydra, and that's super against his morals, and we have this whole, see, that's creating conflict. That's good, it's organic conflict. And my final glaring issue with What If episode 1, Peggy Carter was the Winter Soldier, is the pacing was awful. Like, they only had I think it was 29 minutes, and then there was some extra for the credits, but it was they tried to fit a whole 1 hour and 40-minute movie into a 29-minute period, and again, that just didn't work. Almost all of it was montages until the end, where they finally buckled down and tried to tell a story, but by then it was just too late. So I think initially when I was watching episode 1, I felt like it needed to be longer. As I go forward and watch more episodes, and I'll touch on this in a minute, I think they actually made more of an effective use of their 29-minute runtime, but episode 1 just could not stick it. Couldn't stick the landing, couldn't even get off the diving board, or any other sports term for failing at the start. I don't know if you play Mario Kart, they like overthrust and like spin out, whatever. The point is, it just didn't work. Alright guys, I am not saying What If is bad, okay? Hear me out. I'm just saying I don't think episode 1 worked very well. What If is a really cool concept because it deals with the butterfly effect and, what if this happened instead of that? But not all changes make a big difference. I mean, I don't know. When the Avengers are formed with Peggy Carter and possibly without Tony Stark because he never builds a suit, most likely, does that have major repercussions? Does Tony continue to be an arms dealer in this alternate timeline? I don't know, because they didn't tell us. Theoretically, the possibilities are endless, but they have to actually show us that. Even if it's just for a few seconds at the end, even if it's just a montage. Now, I know some people are going to say, I can just use my imagination, but I mean, it's a TV show. I am supposed to be shown what happens. If I wanted to read what happened, I'd just go on Reddit and read fan fictions or fan theories about alternate realities, and we all know there's tons of them. Anyways, that's just my opinion. I know a lot of people liked episode 1, but for me it was honestly a struggle to get through because I really couldn't find a reason to care. Because Disney/Marvel didn't give me a reason to care. The only thing I can give episode 1 is that the animation was really fun. I quite liked it, but it's the same animation throughout the course of the show, so I can't even say that was anything episode 1 did right specifically. It's just they fell into the category of being part of the same show. But I never judge a show by its first episode, and the other episodes do get better, so let's talk about those instead.
Sounds fun, but why stop at one world, huh? When we can show you all of them.
Honestly, I must say, episode 2 was a step up, a pretty good step up from episode 1 actually. But I still feel it fell victim to a lot of the things I didn't like about episode 1, at least in the beginning. The beginning of episode 2 started out pretty much exactly how Guardians of the Galaxy started out. Only instead of Peter Quill being abducted, T'Challa was abducted from Wakanda. However, I quickly realized episode 2 handled the whole butterfly effect situation infinitely better than episode 1. As the episode progressed, we actually got to see how this small error the Ravagers made up front really affected the entire timeline. Unlike how in episode 1, the repercussions of Peggy Carter becoming a super soldier are not made clear in the slightest. Anyways, T'Challa's upbringing leads him to be a lot more suave than Peter Quill. It's actually an interesting difference. What if mirrors the scene where OG Star-Lord Peter Quill steals the Power Stone with one major difference? Korath the Pursuer is actually somewhat of a fanboy of Star-Lord, and by fanboy I mean teenage girl at a Justin Bieber concert in like the early 2000s type of fanboy.
Oh, Star-Lord! I'm a huge fan of your work. What are you doing here?
That was not the reaction I was expecting.
Hey, stop! Show some respect! This is the Star-Lord, legendary outlaw, steals from the powerful and gives to the powerless. Should we be bowing? I feel like we should be bowing. I mean, unless we should be kneeling.
Anyways, Korath ends up being so much of a fanboy that he actually ends up joining the Ravagers further down the line, who are now actually acting as Robin Hood figures throughout the entire galaxy. I guess this actually makes sense, as Yondu was actually not that much of a bad guy, ever. He was a pretty good guy.
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
Just a simple man trying to make his way in the galaxy. Peter Quill just so happened to grow up to be somewhat of an ass, which furthered Yondu's villainy, I guess, or they kind of bounced off each other. You know how bullies are. Anyways, growing up, T'Challa reminded Yondu who he really was inside, and I think that's, how that happened. I guess in this instance, the MCU followed the bad ending, so to say. When you have choices in a video game which ultimately lead to an outcome that can either be good or catastrophic? Yeah. We ended up getting the asshole Peter Quill being a pirate ending. Sure, he goes on to be a Guardian of the Galaxy, but he also causes a lot of misery and just inconvenience for a lot of people along the way. Alternatively, everyone likes T'Challa. Hell, even Thanos becomes a Ravager because they all like T'Challa so much, which I actually thought was pretty cool, not gonna lie. One of the major changes I actually didn't even notice until I started writing the script for this video was that Gamora was nowhere to be seen, which makes sense because Thanos adopted her, and by adopting, I mean he killed her family and kidnapped her. Without the sibling rivalry, Nebula grows up to be a pretty good person, which was cool to see. We also see that Drax the Destroyer is living a normal life as a bartender, which also makes sense because since his wife wasn't brutally killed by Thanos and his goon squad, he had no one to avenge, so he just, lived. See, this is what episode 2 does so much better than episode 1. All we get to see is Nebula. We get a bit of backstory about what Nebula's up to, doing stuff with the Collector and whatnot, without, dealing with Thanos. And we just get to see that Drax is living a normal life. We don't even get to see Gamora, but that's what gets your brain thinking. You're like, what is she doing? And whatever she is doing, she's interacting with infinitely different people who she would have been with Thanos. So all of those tiny little ripples can make a giant change in the entire story as a whole, and that is what If is supposed to be about, not some stupid gender swap thing where pretty much the same events happen. So yeah, if we were watching the bad ending in the actual Marvel movies, we are definitely watching the good ending version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe in episode 2 of What If. Star-Lord is a guy who is now universally liked and respected even by his adversaries. Yondu has turned the Ravagers into a force for good in the galaxy, and I guess I spoke too soon because we have to talk about that ending. I think we should also talk about why the Collector looks like Set from League of Legends, but that's a whole nother video, a whole nother day. I'm joking, we're never talking about that. But speaking of Set, he even acts like Set. I mean, this guy's just tanking punches. I swear, the more you punch him, the stronger he got. Anyways, in the end, Star-Lord goes back to Wakanda and takes all of his Ravager friends with him. Hopefully he doesn't stay in Wakanda because it seems like he has much more important role amongst the stars than he ever does or will on Earth. Unfortunately, T'Challa's fortunate ending comes at the cost of a tragic ending for another character, that being Peter Quill. Ego, Peter's celestial father, finally catches up with him on Earth. However, Peter never learned to fight, he never went to space, he never did anything with his life in this timeline evidently. When Ego catches up with Quill, he's literally mopping the floor at Dairy Queen. So I guess it's safe to say Disney got that DQ sponsorship. Anyways, this is bad because Peter is now destined to have the same fate as all those children of Ego had in Guardians 2. Quill's dead. He's got no chance at all. And not only that, but the rest of Earth might go down with him as Ego starts expanding, as he did in Guardians 2. So do with that as you will. This ending was fantastic because it actually makes sense. Unlike episode 1, episode 2 actually shows that these small changes to the timeline actually result in something that can be quite, major. Now, not just some stupid mundane gender swap, which ultimately works out in the end for everyone, really. It also told a radically different story, which is, what I hope everyone else was looking for when this show was pitched to us. Episode 1's only difference, aside from specific character stories, was Peggy Carter fighting a giant space squid. Overall, I thought episode 2 was pretty good and I really enjoyed the ending. I can say in confidence that this ending actually made me think, what if?
Stark may be eccentric, but he's got potential.
What he's got is a hangover.
Episode 3 was my favorite episode of What If, hands down. Nothing comes anywhere close to the absolute craziness of this episode. The implications alone from this turn of events is catastrophic for the future of this alternate timeline in the MCU. Anyways, episode 3 opens with Tony Stark getting murdered. Now, just from that opening, I knew I was going to like this episode. I even knew I was going to like this episode just from reading the synopsis, honestly. But basically, someone or something is out attempting to assassinate every single member of the Avengers before they even form. This is an interesting concept because the Avengers are kind of important to Earth's safety, just a tiny bit. As it turns out, the assailant is none other than Hank Pym. Evidently, he's trying to strike a blow at S.H.I.E.L.D. because he believes it's their fault his daughter, Hope Van Dyne, who was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent in this timeline, died. This makes a lot of sense. I totally see how losing Hope would push Hank Pym over the edge. I love everything about this plot. First of all, I love all things Ant-Man. I don't care if it's Scott Lang as Ant-Man or new Ant-Man. I don't care if it's Hank Pym as OG Ant-Man. I don't care if it's Hope Van Dyne as the Wasp or Cassie Lang as Stature. I just think the whole Pym particle thing they've got going on is awesome. Seriously, imagine having the power to shrink yourself to any size you want while maintaining your normal density you'd have at normal size. Ant-Man is definitely the most powerful Avenger, at least if we're going by scientific accuracy. Maybe Thor beats him, it depends. I don't care what you say though. Like, you know why a knife is dangerous? Because of the pressure of the impact applied to the human body while utilizing its extremely small surface area. Well, imagine getting punched in the face by a fist the size of a bullet or smaller, but it had the mass of a 150-pound man wearing a metal suit. You just wouldn't have a face anymore. It just wouldn't exist. And that's why Ant-Man or any of the Pym particle superheroes are overpowered. Anyways, Hank Pym dispatches of all the Avengers with ease using his ability to shrink. He flies inside Stark and, rips him up from the inside. He causes Hawkeye to accidentally shoot Thor while he's trying to get his hammer back within the events of Thor 1, Phil Coulson's there, everyone's there. Anyways, he flies inside Hawkeye's brain and eats it, or something, whatever it is he did. And he goes inside Bruce Banner and throws an embiggening disc at his heart, causing him to literally explode, which was actually rather gruesome, at least for what the show is going for. And then he just straight up goes to town on Black Widow the same way Ant-Man did in Civil War before she cheated. And yeah, I think she cheated. Scott Lang had her beat. Anyways, it's great they used Hank Pym for this because honestly, no other assassin would have convinced me. S.H.I.E.L.D. has resources that would have found anyone who wasn't literally the size of an atom if they were assassinating all these really important people. Anyways, I like how Loki came down from Asgard and brought the entire army, the Asgardian army, and used Thor's death as a ruse to take over Earth. That was a very Loki thing to do. I found it pretty obvious he was going to take over, but it was still funny. Another thing I loved was how Hank Pym was actually using the Yellow Jacket suit from Ant-Man, or at least something that looked very similar to it, but had the same capabilities at least. It makes sense because, if Hank was going to go on the warpath, I'm sure he'd use a suit that was actually built for, war, or maybe I just like the lasers, who knows. There was only one thing in this episode which kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I might actually have an explanation for it. Nick Fury kicks Hank Pym's ass, and I just don't see that happening. I'm sorry. I know I'm a big Ant-Man fanboy, but seriously, Hank could have shrunken smaller if he wanted to, but for some reason chose to only shrink to the size of a fly, which is obviously perceivable by a human as we all swap flies. Hank even opts to fight Fury one-on-one at normal size, which again just makes no sense. It's like Pym is trying to lose this fight. Pym actually calls Fury out and seems confused on how well he's doing, considering, he's just kind of a normal person.
You're still pretty spry for a guy with a corner office.
Yeah, anyway, this is the point in time where Nick Fury just starts teleporting around and duplicating himself, and yeah, obviously this is when I realized it was probably Loki the entire time. I don't know if Fury was ever really fighting Pym. I don't know if he was there at first and kind of just did a switcheroo, but I honestly don't even think that Loki would be able to beat Hank Pym, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, Hank is just getting swatted out of the air like a fly due to his own bad decisions, not because he's not powerful. But still, come on guys, Loki is shown to not really be able to fight anyone else in the MCU unless he has the drop on them. Now, I'm not saying Loki can't fight, but I'm saying that his abilities in a 1v1 have never resulted in him winning said 1v1. Loki's whole thing is deception. Hank was well aware of his presence, or at least a presence, as he was actively fighting him. But whatever, I'll let it go. As this was my only issue with the episode, I'd still give it a 10 out of 10, and I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing how the rest of the show goes and what it has in store for us. Hey guys, thanks for watching to the end. If you enjoyed the video or agreed with my opinion, why not subscribe? And hey, even if you didn't agree with my opinion, why don't you subscribe so you can argue with me about it in the comments? And, you know, obviously like and comment, because that helps out a lot. So anyways, I will see you guys in the next video, and once again, thank you for watching. Goodbye.